Hello everyone. Welcome to our new show, The Writing Life. I'm Steve Long, and in this program we hope to bring you all aspects of writing. From various authors' points of view, I hope to get some publishers, journalists, memoirists, but primarily the writers themselves. And because we want to cover all aspects of writing, this could be fiction or poetry, again, memoir, journalism, songwriting. I would encourage you to contact me if you have an idea. If there's someone that you'd like to see us interview, you can write to me at my website, stephenwlong.com. And today, my first guest, I'm so happy to have my friend Bob Zahniser here. Bob is a writer in many genres. Bob, would you say particularly poetry, or do you just...
I think particularly poetry.
Yeah.
And then short stories and then plays.
And then plays.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed all of yours. Before we got started, I asked, when you have an idea for something, how do you find expression in a particular genre?
Well, when you've got an idea for a story, it's usually fairly clear. It's a story and whatnot. However, sometimes I find that I'm writing a story and I'll read it and like, no, that really, the idea would work better as a poem. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. I'll be writing a poem and like, no, that's ending up more like narrative. And, or I'll be writing a short story and like, oh, wait a minute, this is all dialogue. Perhaps this is really a play. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it depends on just what I'm thinking about and what I think will best fit what I'm trying to express.
Yeah. I had a teacher one time who says the problem with so many people is they want to have written. And conversely, there's a saying that writers write. You're prolific. You write a lot. Yeah. And I wonder, is anything an inspiration?
Pretty much so.
Yeah.
I mean, as you saw a couple of weeks back, I got a thing from the New Yorker in the mail for a subscription. Mm-hmm. And that ended up being a poem because the subscription asks you, they do an automatic renewal. Mm-hmm. And I was ready to go for it until I saw there's an automatic renewal. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. They're asking me to trust in the future. Right. So just things like that, just translate into poems. I mean, you see something unusual. We've had so much rain and there's, water flooding the fields. And mm-hmm. Pretty much anything can act as an inspiration. Sure.
I was recalling one of the poems that you'd done about a sheep, and the narrator was one point of view, but then at some point we heard from the sheep. It was from the sheep's point of view. Do you remember that?
Yes, yeah. That was fun. And the thing is, we've got sheep, so sure. You see the way they do things, and from a human perspective, it makes no sense at all. But then when you try and put yourself in the sheep's perspective, what we're doing with the sheep makes no sense at all. Sure. So, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. I know you know Barbara Drake.
Yes.
Local poet and wonderful poetry teacher. She talked about how people think sheep are dumb, but she said sheep are exactly smart enough to be sheep, and that's what it takes.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So before we go too far, I know you brought some poems. Could you read, start us off with one of those?
Certainly.
Do you want to set this up and tell us how you came to this?
All right. I was going to do it after, but I can do it beforehand.
Well, whatever you like.
No, that's all right. I went to Wordstock this year downtown, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. But I went to a presentation that had 3 what I would call academic poets. Mm-hmm. And when I say academic poets, I don't mean poets who are in academia, because the only place a poet can really go if you're going to earn a living and write poetry sure. and have them somehow related is into academia. And there are wonderful poets in academia. Lex
Runciman.
And there's another one out there, the one who's going to be hosting the, I think it's Tom something.
I don't know.
He's going to be hosting Wordstock. He's also out there. But anyway, just being in a college environment teaching it is not to my mind a bad thing.
Sure.
However, there are elements where some people say, okay, we're teaching this and this is what a poem should look like. This is what a poem should do. This is how you write a poem. And if it doesn't fit this standard,
Right.
then it's not a good poem. And I totally disagree with that.
Sure.
And so when these academic poets were up there talking about, what they thought was good poetry and what you should do, it just turned me off entirely. And I wrote this poem.
Okay.
So, Ekphrasis, Wordstock 2015. This is not a poem about a presentation about poems about art. This is not a poem about the ironic distance repeatedly spewed unironically by a vampire of academia whose word assemblages meet the strict requirements of the French Academy. Oh, that was meant to be ironic. The French Academy was the pre-impressionist coffin of creativity, where only paintings which met the strict qualifications of subject, color, and technique the academicians dictated were considered art. The academic artists produced piecework for the purview of other academic artists and ignored or condemned all whose works didn't comply. Before the academics' exhibitions, they'd dissect the desiccated corpses of the dead images they'd produced to ensure nothing living went before the public. Much like the MFA-edited compilations of MFA-produced word clouds today. This is a poem meant to castigate those who've forgotten that a brain can't survive without a heart.
Yeah.
So.
In one of my many writing classes, there was an admonition, don't equivocate, and you didn't. And it also reminded me, and I can't think of the whole line, but E.E. Cummings had a poem that started, if feelings are first, and I think that's what you've touched on. And in fact, here's my metaphor. I think there are, if you're talking about music, I think a garage band can be more appealing, and they'll miss a note, and they'll, they're off key maybe, but there's real heart there.
Exactly.
As opposed to some perfect, sanitized song that you might hear that it sounds like it's been through some kind of a blender.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing right about it.
Yeah, and there are some musicians who start off and they're very honest and direct and whatnot, and somewhere along the way, someone convinces them that they need more production values and whatnot, and then pretty soon, the heart's gone out of it.
Sure.
And I think in writing, I mean, you can produce very bad work, based on emotion, if that's all you're writing about. I mean, you need to have some technique and whatnot, but to make everything technique is a huge error, and it turns people off.
Sure.
I know.
I edited, I was given some sample work by a woman who's a friend, and she had an axe to grind, and and this was a case of raw emotion with no technique. And she had aimed this at, she'd been done wrong by a guy, and I asked her if she knew the term purple prose, because it was almost Victorian, but she forgot about technique, and it was just venting. So there's the other side of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a balance somewhere, but the thing is, you don't usually find venters assembling in groups and excluding people who are non-venters.
Okay.
You don't see them starting up magazines that are only for venting, and if you don't get venting poetry, it doesn't get published.
If we have time, I'm hoping that, or I may have to have you back for this, but Bob and I are in a critique group together, and I think it's very successful.
Yes,
and,
I agree.
And I honestly feel blessed to be a part of that group.
Me too.
And maybe we can talk a little bit about what does that mean? What does a successful critique group do?
I think that different critique groups are good for different skill levels.
Right.
And I think that our group is good for people who have been published, you know, are of a skill level that they could be published.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're people who have already slogged through the work of, you know, refining their art to a point.
Sure.
And but there are other groups, like there's one that meets at the library. I think it's the last Monday of each month, and it's
Yeah.
just a free walk-in group, and that's better for a full range. You know, you get people in there who haven't read before,
Right.
you know, and they're trying to get that confidence to produce their stuff to the world. And to me, there's something wonderful about that.
Well, I think so too.
Yeah.
I know when I started, you want so badly for some kind of feedback.
Yeah.
And it's tough because if it's your mom, you know what she's going to say. Oh, this is terrific.
Yeah.
And you'd like to believe that, but it's probably not. And so to have some objectivity and a sort of a peer group, maybe people that are at the same level, I think is so valuable.
I think the most critical thing in a group is not so much the skill level of the individuals involved, although the better skill the higher, but you don't want to get people who are just negative. You want
Right.
people that are going to give constructive criticism. You want people that aren't going to be trying to attack others, you know. And if you've got that in a group, you're halfway to success right there.
Sure. So I think that's, well, in fact, let me give you the definition that I was given. In a critique group, you should act as if you're on an editorial board and you're critiquing a work that you've already purchased. So you can't say, this doesn't work for me, go away. What you have to say is, how can we make this better? And then it's about the work. It's not about the person.
Yes.
For a very short time, I was in a group that was mostly about drinking wine, and secondarily about people just wanted to read their work and get praised for it, and you know, and that's fine for what that is. It's not going to make you a better writer, so I think you need to stay away from that sort of thing.
Was it good wine?
In fact, this wasn't. This was California wine, so it's
Oh,
just,
well, okay.
if we're drinking wine, it's going to be Oregon wine.
Yes.
No, but that was great. And you know right away where you're at. In fact, there was a woman in that group who said she'd never had a lesson because she was told she was so naturally gifted that it could spoil. And I thought, well, this is silly. It's not for me. And we moved on from there. But I had been in a group at one time that was headed by a very successful author. And so the things that we chose they were novels, and the group that you and I are in is more open than that.
Full spectrum, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we've critiqued letters to the editor.
Yep.
And I think to some extent, writing is writing. And
Well, I think with our group, the best thing is just the people are trying to help everyone, and they're trying to get help themselves. And what you were talking about with new writers, I mean, one of the things that's just terribly difficult when you're new is, you know, and even when you're older, you know, this is your baby. I mean, you know, and
Sure.
you're showing it to the world, and they're going, that's an ugly baby.
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
And it's just hard to deal with that. And I think that once people get through the experience that, or like it's presented in a way that people are trying to help them, like,
Sure.
you know, perhaps if you brushed your baby's hair,
Right.
or, you know, washed the baby's face might.
right.
And, but once people learn that, I think that it makes it easier to improve their writing.
Well, Bob, I agree. We're about out of time. Let me remind people, if they want to contact me and make a suggestion, it's stephenwlong.com. And I thank you so much for coming in today, and I'll see you in, what, an hour or so?
In our critique group.
We'll be in our critique group.
And I'll be merciless, actually.
Yeah, you're the exception. Thank you.